So we have a very similar climate. 1 degree of latitude is the difference, basically, just marginally slightly more than 1 degree. And of course that 1 degree gives us some other advantages in that we have a slightly longer day during the important part of the season, which is the growing season between equinoxes. We do have, as a consequence of that, we actually have can have a longer growing season, subject to us falling into, as you rightly said, falling into the October rains. In the last, certainly the last 7 or 8 years, the picking has really started 1 year on September the 30th, but generally it's been about the 1st or 2nd of October. So usually it's out of the way before the muck of October comes along, which of course is natural. It's post-equinox, it's when the winds come and the change in the weather patterns. But the longer growing season does mean, and we see that in fact we have longer at both ends, because we actually we bud about a week earlier than in Champagne, and we pick. Now this is a bit difficult to say because we pick probably 3, 4, 5 weeks later than Champagne. But if you talk to the chief winemaker for the gene makers, Louis Vuitton, yes, who owns most of Champagne, but he doesn't personally. But as he said to me, he said, well, the standing instruction now is to pick at 9% alcohol, because that way they've lost a little bit less to any rot. They've kept the acidity up a little bit. They aren't so ripe, but there's some less phenolically ripe. So losing some of the flavours, but that doesn't matter quite so much. But most particularly, they can then add quite a lot of sugar. And of course, sugar is much cheaper than grapes, because sugar adds volume to the wine. So perhaps less so the last couple of years, it's not been so necessary, but it is a thing. So they've been picking. There's a couple of years in the last 3 or 4 when they've picked actually in August, and it does. I think that detracts, and I think one of the things we'll see with the difference between, chances are, as I say, this is one of the only places in the world geographically that you can do the same as in Champagne. But here, we're likely to find more fulfilling character in the flavours of the wine because of the longer growing season. The fact that we can genuinely pick phenolically ripe grapes at 10–10.5% alcohol. We can pick those, go all through the natural fermentations with that, and the secondary fermentations, rather than having to do too much in the way of chaptalization. Or the other side of the equation, which is affects so much of the New World sparkling wines, where really stuck out to me when I went to South Africa. They were picking, went there January 22nd, I was visiting the classic growers, and when I got there they'd actually picked all the Chardonnay. Southern Hemisphere, January, that's equivalent of picking in July. And I said, well, when do you pick the Chardonnay for your still wines? He said, well, end of March, early April. So you can see how less ripe they're. Now, the aspect of that is, well, of course, they don't have to keep the sugar, the acid levels up, because we've seen that, buckets full of tartaric acid to add in the wines. But what you're doing instead is to take the wine off without so much sugar, because the sugars in March and April are going to produce 14% alcohol wines, and we just cannot ferment 14% alcohol wines a second time, because the yeast will just not work.